Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you everybody for coming in today to spend some time with us. We appreciate you taking an hour-ish out of your day to learn more about the Genius Act. That is the topic for today, the Genius Act, which was passed earlier this year in July. The bill sets the foundation for regulating payment stablecoins, setting up the standards, how to be backed, the consumer protections. And so we've brought together a panel of industry experts to really dive into these topics to see where do we stand on implementation. And so we have Ken Chapman from XDC, Joe Ciccolo from the California Blockchain Advocacy Coalition, and Josh Radbod from the Crypto Banking Compliance and Stablecoin Summit. I think you had stablecoins recently to that. And so I asked our panelists here to introduce themselves, and then I'll go into the questions from there.
Yes, Ken Chapman, the head of institutional at XDC. My background is after serving a stint in the military, I have over 20 years of capital markets experience, both on the buy side and the sell side. Worked for a number of firms to include JP Morgan, Bank of America Securities, Bridgewater. And I moved from traditional finance into DeFi in 2018. Started a company, CryptoFuse, which was solving the problem of how do you have a peer-to-peer trustless transaction at the point of time when you don't have access to the internet. Launched that company, ended up shutting it down because the SEC came out and announced that they were applying the Howey test, and it was just weeks before we were going to do an ICO. So that was the very beginning of dealing with regulatory headwinds, which we're going to talk about in this call. From there, I went to an early startup called Anchorage Digital, and so I was the head of banking capital markets at Anchorage Digital, which is the first nationally chartered crypto bank. I was also at Wells Fargo, leading digital assets and crypto subject matter expert. And then now, as I mentioned, I'm the head of institutional at XDC. And what's interesting here is we just introduced USDC stablecoin on XDC, which is a layer one blockchain, just a couple of months ago. And just last month, XDC was the number one blockchain as far as percentage growth for USDC of all blockchains out there. So, Joe, pass it to you.
All right, thanks, Ken. Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Joe Ciccolo. I'm the founder and president of BitAML. We provide regulatory compliance consulting services to the crypto space, and have done so for north of 10 years now, getting involved back in May of 2015. So I've seen a lot in that period of time, worked with hundreds of clients, both big and small, as it pertains to BSA, AML, cybersecurity, consumer protection, and other elements of risk management. The other hat that I wear is I'm the executive director of the California Blockchain Advocacy Coalition. It is a 501c6 trade association representing the interests of crypto, Web3, and blockchain here in California before our California legislature, the governor's office, and various different state regulatory agencies. And in that time, I've had the opportunity to have a front row seat or really a seat at the table in helping to craft and bring forward the forthcoming licensing in California, which begins in July of 2026, so right around the corner. And that includes a specific chapter devoted to stablecoins, which we'll no doubt have a chance to address today, among other topics. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe, Ken, and Dom for having me. My name's Josh Radbod. I'm co-founder and CEO of the Crypto Banking Compliance and Stablecoin Summit. We are an international event with our North American event based in Washington, D.C., and our European event based in London, UK. I'm also a partner at Cogent Law Group, where I lead the firm's fintech, crypto, and banking practice. I've been working with exchanges, OTC desks, liquidity providers, non-custodial wallets, lots of different types of crypto-related businesses since 2017. And it's an honor to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, panelists, Ken, Joe, and Josh. And so a little bit about myself. I'm Dom Schaffer from Crystal Intelligence. I run our Americas business. Crystal Intelligence is a leading blockchain and intelligence analytics platform. I've been in the risk and really solving customer risk challenges as well as other business challenges over the last 20 plus years. Like Ken, I was in the military before coming over into the commercial sector. And I've been in this space specifically in crypto data analytics for the past 4+ years. Just give a quick note on Ken and I shared military background. Army Navy game is coming up this weekend. We both graduated from West Point with Army, and so just a little shout out there.
We got to say it. Beat Navy.
All good, all good. And so we're going to get into a couple of housekeeping questions first, and then we'll get into the questions themselves. We have our first poll question up, so if you guys want to take a minute, thank you for your participation there. A little bit of housekeeping. Please post your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can at the end. We do plan to have time at the end. And also, as you just saw, we have poll questions going throughout the webinar, and do your best to answer those to get that audience participation. So to our first question, it's really on where are we now? As you may appreciate, passing the bill is one thing, but we're in various stages of implementation, and the OCC, who's really the lead, the OCC, SEC, CFTC, have yet to weigh in. They have until July of 2026 to really put out their formal guidance, but there's been a lot of work behind the scenes on that front. But in the meantime, the states are having various activities, as well as those stablecoin issuers, fintechs. The ecosystem really is really looking forward to launching. Hey, how do we take advantage of stablecoins and the regulation when it goes into effect? And so I'm going to start with Ken and go around the room on where are we now?
As far as stablecoins?
Yep. Or the implementation of the Genius Act.
I would just say that one of the parts of the Genius Act that I find interesting is the what is being called the Genius Act loophole, where for banks or issuers are not allowed to provide interest or rewards on stablecoins. But however, an example of like Coinbase, for example, Coinbase is able to provide interest on stablecoins. And so the banks that are out there right now are kind of seeing that as a competitor to deposits at the banks. And so the Genius Act, as it is right now, is a big concern to financial institutions, like because why would a depositor or even a retail depositor want to keep their deposits in a savings account that's getting a fraction of a percentage, where they can take that deposit very easily and just move it over to to Coinbase or to another somewhere else where they can get 4% on their money very easily. And if they needed their money back, they could very easily move it back to their account at their bank. So that's a big concern for financial institutions. And you can bet that the financial institutions are lobbying up on Congress right now, or lobbying Congress right now to close that loophole to keep the stable coins where their yield or interest cannot be paid on those stable coins. So that's something that I see as being something that is going to be kind of a big deal going forward here.
Thank you for that, Ken. I think it's a good point. Maybe Joe, pass to you for your thoughts on where we stand.
I would echo the sentiments of Ken that I think the stablecoin yield is definitely a thorny issue, particularly for the banks, and I would disagree that it's a loophole. I think maybe it was not necessarily designed to be a loophole. So the yield is offered by the platform. So the law makes no mention of restricting platforms from offering yield. It restricts the actual stablecoin issuer. So that's maybe not necessarily an oversight, but again, representing the crypto community, I tend to not look at it as a loophole, but otherwise, I think Ken did a great job of putting that forward as a chief concern for all parties as we move forward with the rulemaking process, and that's where we are right now. So the law is passed; it's a law of the land, but it's not just that easy. There's obviously not a magic wand, and everybody starts going to work. There is a rulemaking process, so we are in that process right now, where we're waiting for the regulators that are tasked with overseeing this to put forward rulemaking. Now, of course, a lot of the work was done by the legislators that pass this bill and put the language in there, but where the rubber meets the road is the actual rulemaking, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. In particular, the aspect of the bill I'm looking at most closely, I would say, would be the substantially similar test, right? So at the state level, states are permitted to have their own regulatory regime for stable coins, and that's great. But the test there is substantially similar. It must be a substantially similar regime at the state level. So what constitutes substantially similar? I think we could ask everybody on this call and probably get a bunch of different answers. And so it's going to obviously make a difference in terms of what the rulemaking is, the oversight, and the parties at the federal level that are making a decision as to what constitutes substantially similar. And then the different states, as we know, are the laboratories of democracy. We have states that are, if we want to talk politics, we have blue states, red states, purple states, but we also have states that are banking and financial centers, and others that are maybe a little bit more, or rather a little bit less in financial services, and maybe more in technology. So they bring along with that their, sort of subculture and expectations and existing frameworks already in place. And in fact, I'm sure we'll talk about it later. But California has already passed stablecoin legislation, so we may be going back to the well and having to make some adjustments, again, depending upon the rulemaking and ultimately what we hear at the federal level.
Hey, Dom, do you mind if I jump in for 1 second? I just want to clarify. I'm in the camp of innovation. So I'm in the camp of that companies like Coinbase should be able to provide interest or yield on stablecoins. So I was just bringing up that that it's being called a loophole. It exists, and the banks are lobbying to close that. But I am in the camp of innovation.
I'll jump in here. I'm also in the
Yeah.
camp of innovation, and I agree with both Ken and Joe. I think some of the banks, at least what they're showing and what they're lobbying for from the conference state board advisor, the CSBS and the ABA, potentially look at this loophole or however you want to call it, designed, attribute as a fleeing deposits issue. So that's one piece that we can potentially talk about later. And I agree. This conversation that we're having today is very exciting. I think it will be even more exciting once we actually get the regulatory framework from the states and the Fed. So just like Joe said, this is the law of the land now, but there's a lot of work still yet to be done that should come out by July 2026, hopefully sooner. So yeah, that's where we are. I think some companies are already preparing for this. I think Tether launched USAT. I believe that's
Yes.
the name of their new stable coin. I think to try and get ahead of this. So lots of exciting things happening in this space right now.
Yeah, agreed. And I think one follow-up question to this is, Joe, you mentioned California launched their stablecoin legislation. Where do the different states stand? Which states have been more forward-leaning? And let's just leave it at that. Which states have been more forward-leaning with either regulation that's passed or legislation that's passed and legislation that's in the works?
Sure. I don't know that we have time to go through the entire map of the U.S., but
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
certainly leading the way on the pro-innovation
Yeah.
side, and probably no surprise to our crypto friends that are tuning in, it was Wyoming with the issuance of their own
Yep.
stable coin with very high standards, 102% reserves, one-to-one backing, and very strict regulatory oversight. Certainly I would put them in sort of leading camp, and that's maybe a little bit an edge case. As far as regulatory oversight, more specifically, you're right, California is in a unique position where we passed legislation, what's known as DFAL, Digital Financial Assets Law. It's a comprehensive framework to license crypto exchangers and other activities, to be sure, but included in Assembly Bill 39, Chapter 6, for our legal wonks that are listening in, is a section devoted entirely to the oversight of stablecoin issuers. This is particularly interesting. Real quick history on the California legislation. It took us a while to finally pass a licensing bill here, and it's not for a lack of trying. The previous iteration of what is now DFAL in 2022 actually included a potential stab at regulating stablecoin issuers. And the reason it did is because in 2022, Terra Luna failed. And so if you actually go back and look at the old iterations of the bill, you can see a lot of redlining sometime after May when Terra Luna collapsed, when the lawmakers were saying, oh my goodness, we have to do something about stablecoins, and rightfully so. And sometimes in politics, well, a lot of times in politics, timing is everything. And I think that that's where we saw that first opportunity to address that. Now, fast forward, that bill in 2022 was vetoed for, among other reasons. There was some concern about developers and other, sort of non-financial business models being swept in. The governor expressed a lot of concern about that. And I would suggest that maybe the editing in mid-session and trying to insert stablecoin legislation at seemingly the 11th hour ultimately resulted in that bill being vetoed by the governor. But fast forward, again, we passed DFAL in 2023. That particular section, Chapter 6 of AB 39, devoted to stablecoin oversight, is fairly robust. I don't think that there's anything in there surprising. One-to-one backing, pegged to the US dollar. What's interesting about the bill, again, getting back to my comment about timing, is there's actually a section that says if you are essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you're a crypto exchange or a platform that's offering for exchange certain types of token, you may offer stablecoins, but those stablecoins must be approved by the California Department of Protection and Innovation. Well, it's going to be difficult if they're approving licensing for exchanges and licensing for stablecoin issuers at the same time. And how does that play out? I think we're going to find out because, as I'm sure Josh knows, and Ken perhaps too, come July 1st of next year, your application must be in California in order to continue operating. And so it's going to be very unique in that timing aspect. But one other highlight to note here is that these stablecoin issuers are going to have to submit a lot of information because don't forget, at the state level, it's not registration, it's permission-based licensing. So there's going to be a lot of submitting, I would warrant, of financial information, operational information, and compliance information. This may be one of the biggest deep dives into stablecoin issuers that regulators have had. And so we're going to see and hear a lot, I presume.
Oh, very good, Joe. Thanks for those comments. Yeah, anybody else on various states?
I'll piggyback, Joe.
Yep.
Some states have more rules on the books when it comes to digital assets versus others. I don't know if that's to mean that they're more forward-leaning or not. Some may, consider New York maybe forward-leaning in terms of regs on the books, but in terms of getting companies licensed and operated, many view that state as being significantly harder to do that. So I just wanted to mention that, but a lot of the crypto folks on the call likely are aware of that same issue. So,
right. And real quick, piggybacking on what Josh said, a lot of the requirements and a lot of the expectations from New York, believe it or not, helped inform the Genius Act. So as much as the crypto space likes to chide NYDFS and the bit license, a lot of the intellectual property, if I may, or aspects of the bill were borrowed to a degree and helped inform what ultimately became the Genius Act. So pretty interesting tie in there.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Oh no, I will jump on a question. What about Illinois? How are they doing?
I don't think they have stablecoin specific rules on the books yet. I need to double check that. I believe they did adopt a form of the MTMA, which is the money transmission statute that's making its way throughout the states right now, that some states are adopting, and how much of the statute they adopt differs per state. But I'd need to check Illinois after the call. Maybe we could circle back with questions asked and inform folks with answers then.
Well, thanks for that. All right, we'll get to the next questions. That maybe leads into, I mean, there's talk a little bit about states and where they stand. There's a lot of work to do yet. From like, again, hearing what the OCC and other state and federal regulators put out. Obviously, a lot of work state by state potentially with complying with, hey, I need to register my stablecoin. I need to register as an exchange if I'm going to trade stablecoins. In light of that, what do you see is keeping companies up at night? What's going to keep companies up at night? And maybe look at a company lens and also a state lens. Before I jump into the panel here, this poll question, how prepared do you feel your company is for the Genius Act? Yeah, it's kind of Not sure is leading the way, probably slightly. Very prepared is about a quarter, somewhat prepared about a quarter, or maybe a fifth, I should say. Not prepared a fifth, not sure, a little bit more. Yeah, it doesn't apply to my organization. So kind of in the middle here across the board with about 1/5 across everybody. So it's interesting to hear that. But in light of that, maybe we'll start with Joe for the next question on what's keeping people up at night.
Sure. I would say it's uncertainty, like anything else
Yeah,
in business
yeah,
and in compliance.
absolutely.
And I'm sure, and same with you, Josh, as a lawyer in legal, it's the unknown, right? Where, as we sort of all talked about earlier, we're in that rulemaking process, and we can read the bill and see what's in it, and there's specific information that gives us an idea of what we might expect, but operationally and tactically, we're not quite there yet. And so I think there's a lot of unknowns, and when you have a lot of questions, that tends to result in a lot more questions than answers. And so I think that that's maybe the worry in putting on my pretending to put on my government hat for a minute, because you mentioned, what's keeping the states up at night. I think the states are worried about another potential Terra Luna debacle, another depegging, another collapse, some sort of market calamity that they want to make sure that they've done everything within the rules and within their power to prevent or mitigate to the best of their ability, because we can't prevent everything, right? But what can they do, and how can they put themselves in that best position, and not wanting to make a critical mistake or error in judgment, and of course wanting to adhere to the substantially similar requirement at the federal level, and what does that look like?
I can, look at this from a different perspective, because I've,
Yep.
been, going to, large, global corporations, talking to CFOs and people that manage corporate treasuries, talking to them about, stable coins, and talking to them about, cross-border payments and what that looks like. And there is, concerns around uncertainty, but it's also just, the unknown. This is something new. And when you're talking about a corporate treasury, things have been done a certain way over decades. And now you're talking about doing something that is new. And everybody you talk to, they're extremely interested. And when you're talking about saving substantial, you're talking about substantial savings. And you're talking about being able to save, you have savings, but you're also able to make money by, being able to free up money that's been locked. You're able to move money faster, basically this, where it took days, it's instantaneous. And it's just you go and talk to people that have managed treasuries, and these concepts, they're all new. And so it's really an education process. But just some of them, it's almost, some of them feel like it's too good to be true kind of thing, because when you first walk in the door and say this is what it can do, sometimes they have a hard time wrapping their head around it. But it's, when you're out there, you're saying, listen, other corporations are looking to adopt this, other corporate treasuries are looking to adopt this, and also this is what's being discussed at industry working groups. The CFOs of these major corporations, when they go to their conferences, they go to their, their trade publications. This is what's being talked about. But it's but getting them over the hurdle and actually getting them to the point where they're, ready to adopt. We're going to see adoption, accelerate here over I would, if you talked to me a couple of years ago, I would say I would have told you adoption's probably, 5 to 10 years out. It's not anymore. Just like Chairman Atkins of the SEC, he shocked me in the past week here when he said that he believes the securities would be tokenized within 2 years. I think that global payments is going to be accelerated too. And I really believe that I think we're kind of hitting an inflection point where we're going to see, rapid acceleration here over the next couple of years.
I completely agree with Ken and Joe. You know, when we were talking about this, both in my conference company and at the firm years ago, we were looking at kind of the same timeline, but we're starting to see things really rapidly take off. I mean, real world assets coming on chain is happening much faster than I think a lot of people thought. And I think layer ones, XDC,
Yeah.
This is going to be very beneficial for them. All of these transactions, all of these transaction fees, and global payments, same story. I think this world is actually rapidly, um, accelerating faster than a lot of people thought. And I think that's also, why some of the states are also concerned about this, back to Joe's point about Terra Luna. So I agree with both of you guys wholeheartedly. And I guess back to the question that Dom asked, I think the unknown and the uncertainty that both Joe and Ken mentioned is spot on. I mean, once we actually get some rules in front of us, hey, what are the elements for the application? How do we meet these standards? You know, Companies will feel a lot better than where they currently do right now, I think. So
Yeah, the good comments, good feedback there. I think this leads me to the next question because, well, there is uncertainty, and sometimes that uncertainty gives companies and governments reason to pause. Like, all right, we're going to wait and see. In this case, I think we're seeing a different trend. I mean, Ken, you just talked about XDC launching, Circle, USDC.
Yes.
You have Anchorage launching with Tether, a large number of other projects that are being launched on the commercial side. Plus, states are already leaning forward. Wyoming, even before Genius Act was launched, Wyoming launched their stablecoin, and California in parallel. California was working on it before the Genius Act as well. And so a lot of entities are forward leaning, like, okay, the risks be what they are, uncertainty be what it is. We're going forward. We're seeing enough to we think the uncertainty risk is worth the opportunity. So the next
Well,
question is what's working well?
I'll answer, also just comment on what you just said there. Over the last couple of years, prior to 2025, when there was some uncertainty, there was less willingness to take a chance because the penalties were very high. The SEC, the OCC, other regulators were very punitive. Now, you're seeing where it's not. The regulators are more reasonable. For example, Anchorage had a consent order that was rescinded, quite a while ago. Just this past week, Ondo Finance, the SEC announced that they stopped their investigation into Ondo Finance, and so all these investigations, all these punitive actions that were being taken, some of them, even were kind of perceived to be random or, just, without basis. That kind of environment doesn't exist anymore. And so I think that, whether it be a company or whatever kind of entity is, I believe if they, consult, reasonable legal counsel, they are, taking, actions, kind of in a reasonable way, that they're not going to be, the regulators are not going to come after them in an unreasonable manner. So I think that there is the ability to take, reasonable risk without the concern that you're going to have an unreasonable regulator, come after you and destroy your company or, threaten legal action or even criminal action against you. So we're in a different environment now. I can tell you, I've been doing this for almost a decade now, and I can tell you, living in in crypto digital assets, this year it feels different. It's kind of almost like having a weight lifted off of being able to operate. It's a completely different operating environment, particularly in the United States.
I would agree with Ken, Dom, and just to offer a little bit of insight from the business perspective. Innovators and entrepreneurs that we talk to, it's not that they're risk takers; they're generally risk mitigators, meaning they look at the regulatory environment, as Ken said, notable change over the past years behind us, and they see that opportunity. I think there's never going to be a solid green light, but I think right now you're seeing some shade between green and yellow in terms of proceeding forward. And I think innovators, entrepreneurs, as Ken mentioned, and I'm sure Josh would agree, surrounding yourself with qualified legal counsel, asking the right questions, putting your best compliance foot forward, so to speak, and putting yourself in that position, they feel a lot more comfortable to move forward. Was I think if we were to go back in time, maybe a few years with the same with the same bill, Genius Act, and other things being equal, I don't think we would see this level of push and enthusiasm and willingness, frankly, for innovators and entrepreneurs to move forward as they have thus far.
I completely agree with both Joe and Ken, and I love when my fellow panelists say, "Hire a good lawyer." It's perfect. I don't have to say it myself. But
Well,
I
it's kept me out of jail. And I tell you what,
and
I would look horrible in prison orange. It's not my color.
Oh, thank God. Hopefully, none of us will ever be there, and none of our clients and colleagues and friends either. So, just one other note. I completely agree with Joe and Ken. One thing that's interesting, and I guess this piggybacks off Ken's remarks about us being in a different environment. Some really big acquisitions have both closed and also been put in the news recently. The Coinbase and BVNK deal was, I think, roughly around $2 billion. I think they just decided publicly that they're not going to move forward with that deal, but still, that's a positive movement. There's also the MasterCard and Zero Hash deal, which was, I think, around the same price, a $2 billion deal. Previous to that, Stripe had bought Bridge for 1 billion, and previous to that, Ripple had bought Rail for roughly 200 million. So, if you're a fintech or crypto exchange, a company in this space that's either custodying stable coins or has the rails set up to move stable coins around the US and in and out of the US to foreign jurisdictions, I think it's a very favorable time for those types of companies. The largest financial institutions in the world are looking at these companies right now, for growth into the future. And I think Genius has certainly played a potential role in that.
I appreciate that. Those are some good, I think, excellent points. But kind of a follow-up question to this is around, all right, so there's companies are leaning forward, the MasterCard pursuing Zero Hash and et cetera. These are big deals and they're putting some real money into this. And so I think I understand what my perception of, hey, why are they investing this much and leaning forward and understanding in 3 years the winds may change a little bit in Washington. At least get the regulation down in the books now. What is the market opportunity? Why are we as a crypto economy but both federal and state legislatures and regulators getting behind this? What's the opportunity? If we can just kind of net out like what we see is kind of some of the top opportunities here. Obviously, it's stablecoin payments, but what use cases are we solving? The current system works fine. Just kidding. It doesn't.
Thank you, Dom. Yeah, I think the current system works fine in the US for a lot of US persons. I think outside of the US, it certainly does not. And I think companies like MasterCard and Visa looking at this space, they're like the Yankees. They won forever. And what do the Yankees want to do? They want to hire the best player so that they can continue winning forever. So that's kind of the way that I look at this. Not saying these companies are the best, but they've certainly been around for a while doing what seems to be potentially the right thing. But they want to play, they want to be ready for the future. So that's my comment. I know Ken and Joe have some thoughts on this.
But I would say certainly, cross-border payments is one of the stronger use cases. And one of my favorite use cases is around being able to deploy payments in like disaster areas or areas where you need relief or even war zones, because when you have, like, to say you have an area where there's a disaster, and you have people on the ground. There is no bank. There's not there's very little infrastructure. Getting payments to the people. The traditional structure is the payments get sent to some sort of middle tier or middle tiers. Typically, it's more than one, and getting that money to the end to the people that need it is a very difficult process, and typically those middle tiers take part of that payment for themselves as payment for services, and in many cases that the people that need it don't get it. But if you're able to, have a, pay, have use stablecoin, you can actually see who actually gets those payments, and you can make sure that the people that are supposed to get the payment actually get it. And so that's just from a human perspective, just from humanity, that's one of my favorite use cases is the kind of the humanitarian use case. I mean, it kind of mirrors the cross-border payment, which I think from a commercial perspective, or and trade finance, that's a great use case. But from a humanitarian standpoint, the helping like refugees, that's a great use case. Then of course, my background is capital markets, and then being able to have instantaneous settlement, that's a no-brainer.
I would agree wholeheartedly, and as Josh kind of sort of drove a distinction between us here in the U.S. and the Western world and the rest of the world, so to speak. I often find myself having to really explain the why of stablecoins and other cryptocurrencies here in the U.S. But I know that if we were to talk to a Venezuelan, a Cypriot, or Argentinian, we don't have to explain the why of a stablecoin. For many, it's a lifeline where not only do they not trust the banks, that's one thing, but they're losing money. Effectively, it's burned away through hyperinflation, or there's mistrust and misdeed with governments and civil unrest. And of course, as Ken mentioned, the ability to get funds into disaster relief areas, speaks to a strong humanitarian pull.
Yeah, and I would just add on those examples, not just on the disaster relief use case, but just getting loans and financing, access to financial products, kind of what you're saying, Joe,
Yeah.
for many parts of the world. Not just money movement, which I think is a big cross-border movement, which is a big value, but also I'm in an underdeveloped country or it's developed, but I don't trust the bank. I'm not getting the access to financial service that I need, but I'm a good credit risk. There's a lot of benefit to having stablecoin-backed financial services for citizens who are out there doing the right thing globally.
I spent 2 months in Argentina. I worked down there for a little bit while, had some clients, and I saw stable coins being used firsthand. Merchants were accepting stable coins. They did not want to hold the Argentinian peso. So it's not just cross-border payments, it's disaster relief, like Ken said, but it's also being able to hold something that's not going to disappear or significantly lose value in a week, 2 weeks, a month. And it was that fast in Argentina. That's how fast the currency was evaporating. It was a week, 2 weeks. The menus for restaurants had dry erase so that they could continuously change the price quickly. So really, really interesting stuff. And yeah, I was using stable coins every day down there.
One of the good things about the Genius Act is that you have a regulated stablecoin. So you have a stablecoin that has to meet certain requirements. And so whether like USDC, that is one of the that's on XDC, but you have USDC. So if you have whether it be an institution or an individual, if you have a Genius Act compliant stablecoin, you know that it meets certain requirements, and you know that's good. You know that you don't have to go research it. You don't have to go, like in the early days of crypto, you had to go research things and try to figure out, is it good? Is it not good? What's going on? You don't have to do all that. You know that it meets certain requirements, whether it be USDT, which is Tether's Genius Act compliant product that Anchorage is launching. But you know that it meets certain requirements, whether you're in the United States or you're in Argentina or you're on the other side of the planet. It doesn't matter. You know that that's good, just like you know that a crisp $100 bill is good. You know that Genius Act compliant stablecoin is good.
Very good. No, thank you. Thank you for that. I'll just look at the last poll question here. Just look at the results. What's your biggest concern around Genius Act implementation? Yeah, compliance costs looks like number 2. Number 1 is regulatory clarity. Yep. And inconsistent data so far. Technology reporting requirements is not one of them. it's a very small amount, one on impact on interstate operations and then potential enforcement action. So yeah, I think they're all highly valid, highly helpful implementation concerns. So thank you. Thank you for that. I think we'll go to the last. I have one more question for the panelists, and then we'll start tackling the some of the Q&A questions. And so the last question, and this we kind of talked with this a little bit on the last question, but what's ahead? What's next? We get the Genius Act. Once things are in place, do you see any new innovation or any, what's around the corner from the Genius Act? Once everything's in place, what's next?
Well, I think what's next is just going to be rapid adoption because what we've been, seeing is, a lot of discussion, a lot of people getting educated, a lot of, projects. And so there's, kind of been, everybody, it's almost like if you've gone to a, kind of the beginning of a 5K run where everybody's, pushing up toward the start line. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. Everybody's kind of pushing up toward the front. And I think that, once everything there's regulatory clarity and especially the large financial institutions are comfortable. They know what the rules are, and they know that they're not going to they'll be able to play within the rules, and they know what the regulators are going to be comfortable with. And that's going to be when the gun goes off and we're all running. And I said, when that point comes, hold on. I think that's what's coming. I don't think there's going to be some kind of new innovation that all of a sudden hits us. I think we're going to start running.
That adoption curve is just going to take off.
Yep.
I agree with Ken wholeheartedly. Joe, do you have a comment on that? I've got one on implementation, but if you got a comment on what's ahead.
No, I think we sort of alluded to it earlier in our conversations with respect to we'll figure out what substantially similar really means when the states start interacting with the regulators at the federal level.
Right, and from my standpoint, I mean, I see tokenization of assets, real world assets, kind of as the next phase. It sets kind of the first phase for payment stablecoins. And then there's more contemplation, more thought as we really dive into the next paradigm, which is tokenization of assets. That's for another discussion. But I want to hit on a few. Yeah. So Josh, you had a point you wanted to make. You were saying on the other side of it.
Yeah, so just on the implementation side and when the
Yep.
rules come out. So there seems to be a federal preemption for the federal qualified payment stablecoin issuer from state money transmitter rules. But it's not explicitly clear on are these federal qualified payment stablecoin issuers only allowed to issue and redeem stablecoins to avoid money transmitter rules, or are they allowed to do all types of money transmitter related activity as long as it's using their issued stablecoin? So that's one piece that I'm interested in learning more about, what comes out from the Fed and potentially states on that. So I just wanted to mention that.
Very good. Thanks for that. Yeah, so I think we'll start hitting on. Thank you for the discussion so far. I think we have some good follow-up questions that's going to take us to kind of go deep on a few topics. And so I think just hitting on the use case and what are the opportunities aspect. There's a couple of questions on. Well, if securities are tokenized, that's one. Would there be a need for the middleman like the DTCC, and maybe on a parallel track, question on if stablecoin usage starts to scale, and does it mitigate or I guess replace traditional payment processors? So you're using your card at the terminal, or you're using some type of cool new crypto wallet that's more liquid with stablecoin. Your transaction fees, the merchants aren't getting hit with the fees. And as a consumer, you're not being charged the same fees because when you send a Venmo payment or a PayPal payment or other payments, as consumers in various cases, you're getting hit with fees. And in the end, the merchants are charging it back. Anyway, a lot of fees involved. So there's a fee aspect where the consumer may not know or care they're using a stable coin. They might not. And then there's really a settlement middleman aspect. Kind of where do you see this regulation really helping promote those use cases that could make an impact in both areas?
I'll answer one of the questions there. One of the things that I had heard early on is I heard people talking about with tokenization of securities, you would have things like custodians would go away. That's simply not the case. The way that kind of the flows and the way things kind of flow would change, but the thought that a custodian would go away or DTCC would go away, that's simply not the case. How things will work in a different way, in a more efficient way, but in the case of a custodian, you're still going to have fiduciary responsibilities. Some the things that make our financial infrastructure safe for institutions and for retail consumers. They still have to be there. It's we're not going to just throw everything out the door. You're still going to have the things that make it work. You had Chairman Atkins of the SEC. Again, I said it earlier in this call, it surprised me just here recently, and he said that he foresees that securities will be tokenized. All securities will be tokenized within 2 years. I mean, that to me, that's shocking. But it doesn't mean that everything gets thrown out the door. That's going to be done in a very organized way. DTCC will be a part of that. And I can tell you right now, I mean, I know the people at DTCC. They have been, forward looking on this for a decade. They're not just sitting back, sitting there, doing what they've been doing, for the last, decades. They have an innovation team. They are very forward looking. And so, they are going to be they are part of the innovation. And so they'll be part of the change that comes. And so will, companies like, the custodians that are out there, BNY Mellon, State Street, Northern Trust, JP Morgan, the Big Four, they are all leaning into this. And so, they will all be part of the new, paradigm that comes. And so, it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off Ken, completely agree. And then, as these payment use cases continue to be developed and fees are continuously shaved and shaved and shaved, I think we'll see new products or existing products start being used more than prior products. I think Twitter is going to launch X is going to launch their all-in-one platform. I know they've been getting money transmitter licenses kind of almost secretly. So people are going to be able to move crypto instantaneously through their X app some point in the near future. So I think there's really, really exciting things ahead of us. I think, how this adoption takes over for folks that are not used to paying for things on their cell phone. For them, it may take a little bit longer, but eventually I think this will end out and be beneficial for all consumers involved.
And as for the payment rails, well, on the DTCC side, what middlemen are maybe eliminated or removed. I think there will be an opportunity for the DTCCs of the world, clearinghouses. There is a lot of manual process that the payment stablecoins will have the opportunity to reduce or eliminate in a good way, making markets more efficient. So the staff might look different. But the efficiency, I believe, is the real opportunity, and that's what will increase. Similar on the consumer payment side, I think there will be more efficiency there. I think fees, the hope, the promise, the dream is those fees will come down, and that market it is more competitive instead of being a duopoly. And so I think there will be some positive innovations on those front. And Joe, you had something?
Nothing on that in particular. I was sort of looking at some of the questions because we're talking about folks issuing different stable coins, and if every as one question put it, every Tom, Dick, and Harry many different reasons. I mean, one, it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time to issue a stablecoin. If you're going to be compliant, as you ought to be, with the Genius Act, you have to have the cash or short-term treasuries, the equivalents, to back that. And so, if we think about an analogy that it came to mind on short notice here, there are some people that rent and there are some people that own the home, right? So it may make sense to own the home, or in this case, issue your own stablecoin, or it may make sense to rent, right? It's somebody else's headache to shovel the snow or ensure that the maintenance is up and running. And it may make sense to, if you're some of these large retailers or shipping companies, for example, to use existing tried and true rails and without endorsement, USDC or Tether or some of the more mainstream, if I may, stablecoins that are out there versus taking the time, energy, and certainly the cost and headache, if you will, of developing your own stablecoin. But I think it's interesting if we want to talk about the philosophical aspect. I'm sure the crypto folks would love to talk about monetary fiscal policy. But historically, governments issuing their own currency is something that is relatively new in the context of overall history. We've had a history of competing currency. If we want to go back to beads and feathers, we could certainly take the conversation back there. But governments issuing currency and being the sole sort of monopolistic power in issuing currency is something relatively new. So we may see sort of going back in time to a period where we had competing currencies that weren't just issued by government. But I know it took us in a little bit of a philosophical twist there, Dom. But
Yeah.
Are you talking about like Bitcoin or?
Well, sure, any different type of cryptocurrency. Well, here we're talking about different stablecoin. Which stablecoin do you want to use? And I think it will ultimately come down to the utility and what ultimately you hope to gain and what is the promise of that. And then, of course, along with that or implied with that are the tokenomics and the safety, security, and compliance of that particular stablecoin asset.
Okay.
Well, I think that leads to, maybe two final points here. Interoperability. A lot of stable coins. Are they all going to survive? Or are some going to persist while others not? And then the interoperability will be important. And so I think that's a challenge that the market will. There is some technology and solutions to address that now. But any quick thoughts on interoperability?
Sure, I'll start. It depends on the platforms that are willing to support that stablecoin or that digital asset, right? And we already see a preview of that if you're looking at traditional crypto assets, traditional cryptocurrencies that are on platforms. There is, and I know, Josh, you know that in our compliance circles, there's a token or coin due diligence policy where these tokens or coins are heavily vetted from a compliance, a technical, information security, operations perspective, tokenomics review before they're even listed on these platforms. And if you want your specific token, whether that's a stablecoin or some other crypto digital asset, to be successful, it has to be widely accepted and widely used. Otherwise, what sort of utility does it have in the marketplace?
Yeah, right? And there's also a technical integration part to that as well. It just because even after it's vetted, it doesn't automatically move, and so there's a technical component to it as well that has to be there. So if it's not as Joe mentioned, if it's not widely used, then it's just naturally going to die off, or it'll only be used in a very niche market.
Right. No, thank you for that. So the last comment here, there was a question on safety and security, compliance, a lot of how do you prevent illicit activity from happening? I think that's a great topic for a future webinar. There are tools out there. Crystal is a part of that ecosystem.
Yeah, there you go. there's your plug.
But we'll save that for a future webinar, and happy to talk more on that topic. But it is absolutely a challenge. There's a lot of great technologies, companies, and solutions out there that are addressing this challenge, but it is like any cyber challenge. There's a cat and mouse game, and it's always kind of understanding what the illicit players are doing and catching up, getting ahead, and so I think that sets us up for a future. Be on the lookout for a future discussion on the compliance, safety, and law enforcement angle. But thank you so much. This webinar is being recorded, it will be on YouTube. So it should be posted by tomorrow, I want to say. But you just go on YouTube and you search Crystal Intelligence. We have our own area of YouTube. All our prior webinars are there. This webinar will be there, but by virtue of y'all attending, you should be getting a link as part of your follow-up. But I really appreciate Ken, Joe, Josh, your time and attention here today. I appreciate the audience for your questions, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dom. Thank you,
you.
Joe.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Ken. Thank you, everyone.